Very warm welcome to everybody. We see we're the last panel tonight. We already had an introduction to the panel given by Manuel right now. So the topic that we have is CPU vulnerabilities, how to resist the future attacks, new technologies and the future trends in IT security. And for this we have some outspoken experts with us. Two of the outspoken experts are from Austria, from Austrian companies, and one expert that we have with us is Romanian, here in a Romanian company, which is a subsidiary of an Austrian company as well. Well, let me start up with Harald Reisinger. Harald Reisinger is the Managing Director, Service Management and Innovation of Radar Services. Harald Reisinger has over 20 years of experience in corporate management in the IT sector. He's the co-founder of GreenTube Limited. And before and during the IPO phase of betandwin.com, better known as Bewin Party nowadays, he was the member of their management team. In 2001, Harald Reisinger founded DefCamp, developing into one of Austria's largest IT security companies, and then started off with Radar Services. It actually originated, Radar Services, the company that you own right now and run right now, together with your co-founders. It originated from his idea for an IT risk management as a managed service. So he has a completely different approach with Radar Services into how to address the IT security issues in companies, in their clients. Harald Reisinger studied international business, interesting enough. Now you're in a very technical topic, but you studied international business at the Vienna University of Economics and Business and at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. I guess the city better known for Warren Buffett living there and being there. Radar Services is Europe's leading technology company right now in the field of IT security detection and response. In focus is the early detection of IT security risks for corporations and public authorities, and is offered as a solution or as a managed service. It's a completely different approach. Manuel Wiesinger, our second panelist, was already with us, already held a speech, got a bit technical. This is when I got a bit scared when he got technical. But Manuel is a security researcher at SPA Research and started as a free software fanatic and a security researcher at SPA Research. At the age of 15, you started using Linux and worked as a sysadmin. You dug into the NetBSD kernel.
Yeah.
Actually also wear the FreeBSD shirt from the Stockholm Convention in 2015.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And you worked on FreeBSD projects as well. You wrote your master thesis on the Linux kernel security and developed a fascination for side channel attacks and software diversity. When not researching, you're involved in the Vienna hacking community. Mm-hmm. Whether that is good or bad, we might discuss it later on, but we hope it's only good. SPA Research is a research center for information security funded partly by the National Initiative for COMET, which is the Competence Center for Excellent Technologies. And within a network of more than 70 companies, 15 Austrian universities and institutions, also international universities, and many additional international research partners, they all jointly work on the research challenges ranging from organizational to technical security to strengthen Europe's cybersecurity capabilities. And last but not least, we have with us Tamás Bakos. Tamás Bakos is software developer at Catalysts Romania. He's a software developer and a software and security enthusiast, and is based in Cluj-Napoca, where the Romanian subsidiary of Catalyst is. His field of expertise is reverse engineering, actually. Catalyst employs right now over 300 passionate people since its creation in 2005. And they create products and projects in 12 locations all over Europe. One of those locations being here in Romania, in Cluj-Napoca. They're taking up the challenges to come up with solutions for services for the clients, like custom software development, project work, product development, from small to large, anything it is, from the way to technical consulting, also all the way to infrastructure. So I would actually like to ask Manuel to take us on the journey, to start off with a bit of an explanation. What are we talking about in this topic? You had a nice presentation before. We're going to have the presentation shorter and less technical right now, so I can actually also follow you. And I would love to, if you could start up with your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm just going to give a short overview about CPU vulnerabilities and where are we now with them. So remember the very first day of January in 2018? Many people were aware of Meltdown on Spectre vulnerabilities discovered in mid-27 by Google and publicly available by the 2nd January or 1st January 2018. And for me, this was a huge shock because I was like, oh my God, do I have to throw all my data away? Do I have to throw all my computers away? Do I have to throw all my CPUs away? What can we do? We did not have proper mitigations by then. And too bad, the first reports about experimental use of these vulnerabilities in malware occurred in February 2018, so still very scary. And then the rest of 2018, some other exploits became public. So, and right before coming here to Bucharest, there was yet another vulnerability discovered, so I really think that won't be the end. So what is the impact of these vulnerabilities? Basically, they allow local attackers to extract arbitrary data from local memory. So attackers have to have code access or the possibility to execute code on the local machine. But this is also exploitable from JavaScript. There are proof of concept implementations for this, which is really bad because buying some online advertising which includes and executes JavaScript is not that hard. So attackers can easily inject JavaScript code into a large number of websites and web browsers. So it's also kind of remotely exploitable via this way. But even worse, some Spectre attacks are also possible via the network. That really means you can extract data via the network remotely. It's really slow, but it still works. It would be enough to extract keys via the network. And I was like, oh my God, do we have to throw it away? I want to throw all my CPUs away. And went to the basement and found that old 486. I have it here in my pocket. I showed it in my presentation, and I really felt like, oh my God, I have to use it. It has 16 megahertz. That should be suitable to run my Emacs. But yeah, so who can feel safe? Because it's hardware vulnerabilities, literally no one using any operating system, and because the vulnerabilities are in the way CPUs work. It's also not really dependent on the manufacturer, because any modern CPU speculatively executes instructions, which is the main cause for these vulnerabilities. So the only proper thing we can do is to never trust the memory. Don't trust what you put in memory and get rid of all the secrets as soon as it's possible for you. So how can we fix CPU vulnerabilities? By software. I'm really confident, because a motivating example is the Hubble telescope. When the Hubble telescope was shot to space in the mid-90s, they installed a wrong mirror. So all the results were completely garbage and useless. So really, really bad. A few hundred millions blown away. But however, the error is constant and predictable. So the NASA was able to write software that actually fixes these hardware bugs. So I'm really confident that hardware bugs can be fixed by software. And everybody who got the heads up now because of the critical network attacks and remote exploitability of such attacks, there are some limitations, luckily. They are still very difficult to do, requires a huge amount of work, and usually conventional attacks against the small business are easier to find. And the attacks via the network currently only work under laboratory conditions. However, we don't know if somebody is exploiting this, because a real reliable internet connection could be exploitable or exploitable in another way we don't really know. But luckily, they're really, really slow. You can extract via the network around 15 bits of memory per hour. But if you make it cleverly, that's still good enough to extract an AES key, for example, in about 17 hours. So, and luckily, there are many mitigations on the way. So mitigations against are typically based in the operating systems, in the CPU's microcode, so in the firmware, and some even in the compiler. But many of them introduce performance penalties, which might be a significant impact for small business, because 30% less execution speed is definitely something to consider, because in other words, that costs money. Yeah, there is a short overview about all the vulnerabilities. Even in my talk, I did not address any of them. That would just take more than the 1.5 hours we have here for our panel discussion. But it's just to show fixes are on the way. But still, we can't know, and we do not know what else we must expect. As long as somebody crafted a CPU and that is running and operating, somebody will craft a way to extract data from it. So I think that was it already, my introduction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Manuel. Thanks very much for the introduction.
Thank you.
You actually showed us now all the threats. Well, I would call it bad news. In journalism, one said bad news is good news. Transfer it to radar services. Bad news is good news. Actually, for you, got to be happy about it. So we asked Harald to give us an introductory statement about radar services and the threats as well, and CPU vulnerabilities. Harald, may I ask you to start off?
Yeah, of course. Hey there. Well, Manuel, thank you for the deep dive into the rabbit hole. I'm not taking you into the rabbit hole. I'm basically taking you out again a little bit. I would like to talk about the situation regarding vulnerabilities in general. At the end of the day, we can say we are in a kind of an age of vulnerabilities right now. If you take a closer look at the distribution and all the vulnerabilities that have been found over the years, probably over the last 5 years, there was a dramatic increase generally regarding vulnerabilities that have been published. Think about 2016, there were about 6,000 something vulnerabilities being published, anything between low severity and high severity or critical. In 2017, we jumped to around 14,700 vulnerabilities. Among those 14,700 vulnerabilities identified and published with CVE numbers in 2017, there were approximately 470 which had the highest criticality, a CVSS score of 10, which is really bad. Some of these, or most of these, actually remotely exploitable. We had around 1,500 of these 14,000 were severity between 8 and 10, so very high severity with a very large number. The interesting thing was the jump between 2016 with roughly 6,000 and 2017 with roughly 14,000 vulnerabilities being published. Nobody really can explain the jump, but it was dramatic over the time. In 2018, what do you think? What is the number now in November, as of November, the total number of vulnerabilities without Googling it? Any idea what it could be? At least 6,000, yeah, good guess. So we are at 14,000 approximately, end of November, or end of October, sorry, end of October, of course. So this is within 10 months, we more or less have the same number as in 2017 within 12 months. Does anybody think this will stop? Yeah, it's great for us. For you guys, you're in security, and it's great for us, for Radar, we are in security also. Of course, it will not stop. It will hopefully not increase too dramatically, but it will not go away. This will stay. So the question we have to ask ourselves, why is it so? Why do we have so many vulnerabilities out there? Who of you guys and girls are working in the security area, like penetration testing and auditing? Not that many, actually. Okay. But of course, you're somehow deep into the security area. So everybody likes vulnerabilities if you're a pen tester or in the security area. We do like them because we can help people identify those vulnerabilities and basically make it better, mitigate or remediate the stuff. Nevertheless, it's all about why are there so many vulnerabilities. It's both. It's software, of course, and it's hardware, as we've heard right now. Interestingly, hardware things get more and more exposed regarding vulnerabilities also. So we do have a severe problem in software design and software management when we create software, because that's why we have so many, or the majority of the vulnerabilities out there. We seem to have a hardware design issue also. So those are the most powerful drivers over the years. Now think of, and I think half of DefCamp is full of IoT devices here, and how you can hack them or expose the vulnerabilities. Think of all the devices that will come to the market that are already there, that are quickly designed, that includes bad design sometimes. So this is going to tremendously increase the number of vulnerabilities we're going to see over time. And think of all the devices out there, those IoT devices and the IT systems that are connected. They will interact and they will be on the internet or on open networks, so easily exposable. That's a problem, a real severe problem we're running into. So we have the software that is a problem, and we have the hardware that is more or less getting a problem. And then we still have the why. So think of like Spectre and all the CPU vulnerabilities, or think of Heartbleed. So who has actually an interest or might have an interest in a very widespread vulnerability, which is very hard to find, but could easily give access to lots of IT systems out there on the market without anybody knowing about it? So think of nation states. And if you think of nation state and the possibilities that go together with Spectre and everything, and Heartbleed and all the vulnerabilities that have been disclosed over the years, there might, I say not its reality, but there might be a long-term strategy and long-term interest by nation states, because it's just a perfect way to interact with IT systems without anybody noticing it, and you can do with these systems whatever you want. So in future, we have to think about how can we make it better. I think it's all about resilience at the end of the day. How can we make our IT systems, and those are everywhere, how can we make those IT systems more resilient? So when we reduce it to the attack vectors again, it's all about build better software. And that comes with have processes in place that support building better software. All the testings and everything, it's out there. So the concepts and everything is out there. But of course, and unfortunately, it's easier and faster to build software that is done within a couple of days instead of a couple of weeks, probably, because you have to test it again until you come to the conclusion that this is something you really can run. So we have to build better software. We have to invest in training and the processes, and we have to allow the time, all the developers out there, the time to really do the testing and everything thoroughly. Second thing is, of course, we have to think about hardware designs. This is probably the hardest thing to fix, because hardware is typically not built for a year or 2 years, but it stays there for a long time. So again, it's about designing that stuff. The third thing, when we think about resilience, because the vulnerabilities are out there and they will not go away tomorrow, so we have to think about how can we detect it continuously. And detecting a vulnerability is, kind of easy. It can be done easily. So we have to think about how can we thoroughly combine the status of IT systems and the potentially vulnerable aspects of these IT systems with the behavior of these IT systems. And when we as Radar think about creating something like a real-time risk landscape of our client base, we have to consider both the status, that means the vulnerabilities of all the systems and the configuration problems they might have. That is basically the open door that is there, and the behavior of these IT systems. So if somebody walks through the door and does something bad with the IT systems, we have to consider both. So that's all about detection. Besides building better software that is more stable and has less vulnerabilities, and designing better hardware, we thoroughly have to think about how can we detect the things that are going on that we don't want to have in our IT structures. Yeah, that's a third part. And the fourth part, and that comes with everything, basically, we have to make sure that the people who are building the software and using the software are well and thoroughly educated. So you cannot patch something that's between the chair and the table and the keyboard. So we have to train the people. And that's hard to understand for somebody who really, is in depth in security like you are. But for somebody who's just a user, it's quite hard to grasp the potential and the threat they can create there. So we have to take the people with us on the journey to make it better and to not run into every single knife that is out there that could be a problem. So that was not detail aspects of vulnerabilities, more high-level aspects, but something we have to take care on a high level, more strategic aspects we have to take care and consider. But I think it was okay for the introduction. Good.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. Very interesting startup, actually putting up some topics that we're going to discuss here now in the next hour. Very interesting, so to say, like what happens, where it comes from, who might it be by intention that those vulnerabilities are there. But we discussed something else before, which I would be interested in right now. You said on the 2nd of January, it was first time discovered Spectre, and so this was the start of the discussion. Was it actually the first time that it was discovered there, or who discovered actually Spectre?
Well, two people independently. In mid-27, Google Project Zero, that's the security researchers at Google learned about these vulnerabilities and talked to Intel. And independently, people from TU Graz in Austria learned and discovered these vulnerabilities and reported them to Intel. And I spoke to them personally, and the comment of Intel was, yes, we already know. Maybe we should do a phone conference with Google and Intel engineers. So they were really just discovered to the best of my knowledge in mid-2017.
It was the Technical University of Graz that you mentioned.
Yes.
So it was found out in Austria, it was found out by Google. Why did one not react in between? You said we had 6 months that we already knew that vulnerabilities were there. Why did one not react on it before?
Well, Google reacted and they deployed defenses in their own cloud infrastructure, and Intel started to develop mitigation techniques. But until it was not publicly available and no proof of concept exploit, they just waited. And then the people from Graz, the researchers from Graz, they are being an independent research facility at the university. Of course, they wanted to publish that because that's their research reputation.
Are they members of your association of SBA research?
Yes.
Yep. So why do they do it? What do you do as an SBA research? What is actually the task that you have, the main task?
Well, reading through a lot of research papers, testing the codes, trying to understand the code, work through proof of concepts, try real exploits, and of course to look for attack vectors for new vulnerabilities, and make a scientific paper out of it. Yeah. That's my task there.
Alrighty, so how much in reverse engineering? We heard that Tamas is an expert in reverse engineering. How much can reverse engineering help you and assist you in finding such vulnerabilities?
Sorry, so after Google and TU Graz found these vulnerabilities, it's really well known how these vulnerabilities can be exploited. So reverse engineers can look for code behavior that does the described attack. But, how Google found out about this, how the reverse engineers at Google found out about this, only they know. They're geniuses. Or reverse engineers might also have a role in detecting such attacks. For example, what antivirus software does usually is they generate signatures for code patterns, and then they match it to running code, and you could do this to these these attacks as well.
All right. Before starting off and going deep into the topic, I would like, actually, Harald, would like to ask you one more time, what is the kind of service that you do? What differentiates you from your competitors on the market? Why are you such a fast-growing company?
Okay, so what we're doing is we are kind of cyber defense center for our clients. So we are analyzing data, behavior data, and status information. That means vulnerabilities and configuration issues and all the behavior information based on network traffic and log data that is being collected and analyzed. And we convert that into something like a false positive free risk landscape. So telling the customer exactly what incident security issues they do have in their environments, wherever that might be, and we give it a criticality, we give it an explanation what the customer needs to do, and we wrap it into a process. So we don't only throw the incidents over the fence and hope the customer is taken care of. We basically guide the customer through the process of every single incident, what to do with it. And after they have done it, they have solved the problem, we afterwards do the verification if they really have done it, or just told us that they have done it, basically. So, and this is a continuous service, a continuous process. To do so, we run the largest cyber defense center in Europe with around 60 analysts that are continuously analyzing the data, really digging into the data. You can imagine billions of lines of data that we have to analyze continuously for every single client. But it is imperative to do so. You cannot do it in another way, simply speaking. Because when you take large organizations, they have tens of thousands of IT systems, they create lots of amount of data continuously, and you have to consider everything, basically, because you cannot blind out something. It's not a good idea nowadays to have blind spots in security analytics, because things are interconnected. If you focus just on the core systems, those are interconnected with other systems, which if you don't have them in focus, somebody might, or an attacker or a malware might rush into these systems and take over the rest, and you don't get it, basically. So you have to do everything at the same time, which is complex and which is challenging, but which is nowadays the only way to go forward, actually. So why we are successful and growing so fast, I think it's the comprehensiveness of what we're doing, not blinding out some things which are inconvenient, but really try to get as much information as possible. Combination of behavior data and status information and all the technology in the background you need, like machine learning components and everything to do the pre-analysis and afterwards the manual analysis, really hunting data, following streams until you come to the conclusion this is an issue you have to follow up. And I think this really differentiates us on the market and basically describes why we are so successful.
Are you telling us on the one hand side that the customer is actually not interested in IT security, that the customer is not interested in the threat itself? Do you tell us that he's maybe not interested in solving the problems, just handing over the problems to you? What is your feeling that you get from the customers? I mean, the threats are getting more and more. Are the companies out there prepared for it?
Well, it depends on who you talk to in the customers' organizations. So, of course, the security teams, the CISOs, and those teams are, of course, interested because it's their job to make it transparent which IT risks the customers do have. When you talk to the C-level, the CEOs and the COOs and the CFOs of the organizations, they more and more get aware that it's their problem at the end of the day. Because if they don't give a shit, for this stuff, and if something happens, at the end of the day, it always comes back to the board. So they have to take responsibility. It gets harder when you talk to the IT operations teams, because when you identify something, let's say you have, thousands of servers, and you identify 5 vulnerabilities on every server, which is a small number for typically something to identify, you suddenly have between 5 and 50,000 security issues you have to take care of. And it is guaranteed almost always that there are 1,000 explanations why things cannot be dealt with right now. So it's always kind of convincing IT teams that it's necessary, imperative to take care of these issues that are there. So that's why something like what we're doing is a continuous service you have to be persistent, you have to go there, you have to convince them that they have to do it and it's doable. And otherwise, there is no second option at the end of the day. Yeah.
But it only arrived on the C-level in the last year, as we understand. I mean,
of
we had
course,
a discussion like that last year.
Only because it also means you have to spend money, because you either have to buy the technology and run it on your own, which is more and more challenging because those systems are complex and you need time and people and know-how, or you have to spend money for a service like we are offering. But it's getting easier because the board is aware that they have to do something. It's just a matter of how fast are they doing it and what is the strategy. So it's either buy the technology, run it on your own, which is harder and harder, I think, or find somebody who can do it for you, and you can split tasks. And our job is always the detection and the creating the transparency, and the customer's job is always to solve the issues we have identified and described how to solve it.
All right. I mean, we heard that it was already known half a year before, but also when it was disclosed that Spectre is, so to say, a problem out there. The disclosure was quite controversial, you said, Tamas. Why was it that controversial, the disclosure? What happened there?
All right, so let me give you some background about this as well. After Google and Google Project Zero and the Technical University of Graz discovered this and notified Intel, they also talked with a couple of manufacturers and companies providing services that are affected, like Microsoft, Amazon, and so on. And they agreed to keep the vulnerability under embargo, which means that they will not disclose it for a while. And this means that they will, well, the idea is not to give attackers the opportunity to develop the exploits, but give the companies a chance to patch the vulnerabilities before. And, well, manufacturers being notified, there were also some Chinese CPU manufacturers or device manufacturers that were notified half a year before the public disclosure. And there was some controversy about these manufacturers, that they might be working together with the Chinese government to create devices with spyware installed on them for Chinese spying on the whole world. And so when everything was disclosed, the US Cyber Emergency Department was really not happy that the Chinese got notified before them.
Yeah. How does...
Sorry, may I briefly?
Oh, of course, please.
I think the disclosure of vulnerability is always a big issue. I had a talk last year with one of the member of the NSA team, and there is a board, a very secret board in the US, which discusses newly identified vulnerabilities continuously. And they make a case-to-case decision whether something is disclosed or whether it is so important for the National Security Agency, for example, or the CIA, that they don't disclose that information of vulnerability because they want to use it in future for, their work, basically. They do this they meet, I think, on a quarterly basis, or if required, with short notice, but they make these decisions. And I can guarantee you they have, the best information they can get from commercial sources and buying stuff and everything. So this is interesting, I think, because they continuously make the decision whether something like Spectre or Heartbleed, are they going to disclose it so everybody can take care of, or as a nation state, utilize it for their work they have to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, Manuel, if we hear that they're not disclosing, they don't want to give the attackers the chance to develop the code, is it actually that easy? How does it work properly? How does the attack work? Is it that easy? You talked about the bytes and the bits and bytes that you actually get out, very low level. Is it easy? Is it something that you can really exploit?
I would say, yeah, definitely. Once you have local code execution, including JavaScript, then it's definitely possible. So this is really a real-world threat. But when I hear about agencies finding vulnerabilities and not disclosing there, then actually this is something really motivating for me as a junior researcher, because it just means whoa, there are things we can discover that they already know. And we get the credit, and we can inform the public. So this is, in my personal opinion, a very strong argument for independent academic research for security vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Because there are a real threat, you can never know if there is real-world exploitation and who is using it.
Has there been a real-world exploitation, like you're talking about attacks? Has any kind of malware already been based on CPU vulnerabilities?
There are the reports from February 2018 where from, I think, Kaspersky or some larger cybersecurity company about experimental exploitation of these vulnerabilities, but I'm not aware of a large-scale real-world exploit. And I'm really convinced that the only reason why this is not done is because there are easier and therefore cheaper ways to get the data you want, or to access the data in an average company.
All right. Tamas, you wanted to top up?
Yes, if I might add something. So these vulnerabilities are currently not exploited for malicious purposes. But
we don't know.
But we don't know. I mean, as far as we know, sorry. So we cannot know if someone already read all of our data based on these exploits, because they're really hard to detect. There are some methods. One of them is the signature base that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, these issues are really low level and hard to notice. And
yeah, and typically you can craft, once you have an attack worker, you can craft stealth attacks, so that take a very, very long time. It doesn't matter because the server is running all the time anyway. And so in a couple of days, you very, very, very slowly extract data, and this makes it far more complicated for detection mechanisms, of course, because there are just tiny, very tiny stuff that sysadmins might not be aware of, and that might be very complicated for detection software.
So you say there might already be something else out there. Do you think you can anticipate some of the codes of the attacks that are going to be out there? Do you think you know which way it's going to develop?
That's very different. That's very difficult to say, because attacks work so differently on a technical level. But as long as you have stuff like speculative execution, or hyperthreading, where one process can really run physically very close to another process, there will always be a way to extract the data. So. And to answer your question, it really depends, but as long as something is not completely isolated, there might be a way. We must always be aware of that.
Yeah. I mean, let's say that what Harald said before might fire up a conspiracy theory that one talks about. Do you think that's possible, or is it just simply not possible to create secure hardware?
Well, secure hardware which is not connected to the internet in 10 kilometers under the sea without side channel capabilities might be secure, but it's really, really tough, because you always have some side effects that you can observe. There might be even acoustic signals which are not really easy to shield, or some side effects. So really guaranteed security is, I would say, technically impossible, because you have always some side channels and where you can craft or side effects, actually.
In the last IT security panel that I had, and the discussion that we had, the talks about IoT, especially the devices, was a difficult one, because they said the devices themselves, security is not part of the design of the device.
Yeah.
The device is only designed to function, not to be secure. So are any devices, or all the devices, are they vulnerable to such attacks?
Yeah, as long as they execute code using physical code execution, so processors, I would say yes, there is definitely something to expect, because all these electrical devices work by using current, by using power and electricity, and therefore their execution and operation has some side effects.
Yeah. If we talk about, now we talked about the devices are being used anywhere. Are there any kind of sectors out there which are more prone to attacks than other sectors? Are there kind of sectors that are also more interesting for attackers?
Well, more or less everybody uses the same hardware, software components underneath. So I think there is no difference in the industry regarding how easy or how hard it is to attack. I think the effects of such attack are different, of course, varying from different industries. When you take a closer look at the critical infrastructure, like all the electricity companies and everything, of course, if you have an attack there and you take out, I don't know, the electricity steering system underneath, it just wraps thousands of households without power. The same is true for, of course, healthcare and everything. So the simple answer is everybody's affected. The results are different. So you have to probably invest more time and more money for different industries. Those are the critical industries typically. Or if you have, trade secrets you want to keep and you have a specific market you're pretty good into, you probably have to invest more money to make it safer. But there are no secure systems, basically. So you have to make sure to do everything, technology-wise and regarding processes around to make it as good as possible. That's the main issue, basically. So the question of whether you have 95% assurance or 98%, that's probably very expensive 3% you have achieved. But depending on the industry you're in and the money you make, you probably have to invest that additional 3% anyway.
Let's maybe ask the question a bit around. Do you see any industries which are more willing to invest money into IT security than other industries?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, all the banking and financing industry was, I would say, by design, it's in their genes, more or less, that they have to invest money. In early days it was the robbery. Nowadays it's the cyber robbery somehow. So it's in their genes that they have to invest money, and they do it for a long time now. And they have, probably all the technology you can get for money. They have well-set processes. They are being audited regularly by the authorities. So those are the guys who are really doing this for a long time. And you see it when you go there, typically. And everybody else, I think, is trying to cope with the situation to make it as good as possible. And the problem nowadays is not the money out there, because they all have money. All the organizations, they typically have the money to spend to buy technology. It's the people they are lacking, because there is not an unlimited source of experts out there who can run the systems, who can, you can read the data, you can make the conclusions and take the right action. That's the issue we are running into. And that's why it's so important that you are here, basically, dealing with security and taking care of that you're really going into depth and are the experts out there, and you probably do see it on the market. You can probably, every one of you can get 10 jobs tomorrow if you want in any country you can think of. So this is a very specialized skill, I think, that is important now and will be much more important in future. Yep. And that's the resources that is lacking, actually.
So if we talk about, there's a high demand of IT security experts, how big is the impact right now of machine learning or artificial intelligence in detection and analysis of IT securities?
Well, if you go around in trade shows which are IT security focused, you can, every second booth is talking about AI or machine learning. I think the truth is it's a supporting technology that is super important and that will be more and more important in the future. The problem nowadays is, the promise they make you when you buy machine learning technology is that you get less results which are more precise. The truth is the opposite, the exact opposite. You get more results, which are probably right, and you still have to invest time, human brain and everything, and experience to come to the conclusion if this is okay or not okay. So it's perfect supporting technology you need to have, because you're talking about billions and billions of data sets you have to analyze. And it's impossible to grasp everything manually. So you need to have machine learning. Nowadays, there is no way. You have to have machine learning in place that is supporting you. But at the end of the day, I strongly believe within the upcoming 15 to 20 years, you still need the experts at the end of the day to draw the right conclusion and to say this is right and this is left and this is important and is not important.
So, Manuel, will we also need the experts in drafting up all the code? I mean, we talked about DDoS attacks before, and we said that DDoS attacks nowadays, you can download the code already from the internet, you can start it. You don't have to be actually a geek or a nerd anymore. Also, me would be able to start off to carry out such an attack.
Yeah, you can just buy it.
What about CPU attacks, CPU vulnerabilities? Is there already kind of a code out there that you can use, like anything ready-made that you can build upon?
Oh yes, there typically researchers publish a proof of concept exploits once they crafted an exploit and found it, because otherwise nobody would really believe it. I could bullshit 15 pages to get a research paper, and without the code where another researcher can really verify it, and then oh my god, it really works. It would not be possible, and these are it's common and usual that they are published, and once they are published, Of course, they are a bit obfuscated, so that's not these research proof of concepts are limited on purpose to avoid large-scale exploitation. But of course, skilled attackers can learn from that code and usually tinker a bit, and then they might find, and then they're pretty sure able to craft very powerful attacks and to unfold the entire power of these attacks. So, if normal attacks would not be so common and so easy, I would definitely expect that there will be a black market for exploiting CPU vulnerabilities as well via JavaScript or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about before, like, is there always a criminal mind behind all the attacks, or where do the attacks come from? Because you spoke in your presentation beforehand that also attacks are being carried out by researchers, just researching IT security, trying to get it better. Where do the attacks come from? Is that an option? That it's not only criminal mind behind it?
Yes. That's difficult to say where the attacks come from. They come from the very nature that code is executed and that this execution has side effects. So it's like when you walk through a room, you can't really avoid making steps, and these steps they make noises and stuff. That's just a side effect. So it's in the very nature of code execution to have side effects. So they are basically just there.
What are going to be the...
If I might add something. So, yes, it might be researchers testing out these proof of concepts, but it might also be that some malware authors are testing some similar stuff, and they are developing some large-scale attack, and we don't know about it yet.
Yes, that you can never know. That's the most important thing. And this is why security research is important, because we never know. As I said before, there is usually a way, or often a way, to craft a stealth variant of an exploit. So that's then really, really hard to detect. So that's...
I think we should not forget that there is a market out there for vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
for,
black
for
market.
Flaws, black market. I mean, as an expert, identifying something that is really nice, you could use remote exploitly, you always have the decision to make, am I on the good side or on the bad side? Because the bad side is paying very well for such stuff.
Yes.
I had a talk last week with a security expert from Germany. They are doing exploit research for example, mobile phones. So the market value for an iPhone exploit, and undiscovered so far, is about $1.5 million US. So that's solid money. You could live from that, of course. So this is, and smaller vulnerabilities on other operating systems or applications pay, I don't know, between $500 and $5,000. So this is still money you can make and live with. So always you have to make the decision white hat or black hat at the end of the day.
Or both.
Or both, yeah, some do it both, right? But that's where the drive comes from. Here it's also a business at the end of the day. Identifying something that is cool and could be exploited or used on a wide range, it has a market value, and you can sell it and live good from it.
And you can create an industry. Future attacks, you said something very interesting beforehand, Manuel. You said that a CPU just makes a noise.
Yes.
It creates acoustics.
Yeah.
You can actually read the acoustics.
Yes,
how
possible.
How would that be done? Can you go a bit deeper into that?
Yeah, you basically just listen to the differences in the noise, because electric currency always makes noise, and there are people who can, or there is a proof of concept implementation for an exploit where you can put two laptops next to each other, and where you can really listen to security keys and to encryption keys. And of course, in that audience, I mean, that would be possible, because I'm sitting next to you, you're working on your laptop, and you're encrypting an email or something at this very moment, and I could listen to it. Of course, it's a proof of concept, but if you spend much time on further developing such exploits, then you might be able to craft something really, really reliable.
Could you kind of already, or is it already used right now? Is it already being used right now? Kind of an acoustic exploitation of something? Can you read the data?
Yes, you can read the data. You have to be very close, but I'm not aware of a real world exploitation. But I'm not aware of everybody with a laptop who is sitting with somebody else with a laptop. So it might be exploited. I don't know.
So what is kind of the idea when you're sitting there doing everyday research about IT security? What do you expect as a future attack? What will come onto us?
I'll definitely expect more side channel and covered channel attacks, obviously. And as long as we have the other fact is, of course, I expect many more classical vulnerabilities like buffer overflows and all these, or SQL injections or whatever, because there is so much code out there which was designed and written by people who don't know about security or who were not aware about security. And in projects where there was no security design in the project design. So I think, but we definitely should be prepared to meet more side channel attacks in the future.
Tamas, if you have your clients and you have different projects, how much respect do they pay or how much attention do they pay to the effect of IT security? Is this already defined in the project or is it just about the functionality of the program?
It's usually only about the functionality of the program. The clients, well, since they're not IT specialists, they're most of the time not aware of what kind of attacks and bad things might happen to them. So they mainly focus on the functionality. But well, at Catalysts, we have a penetration testing team that tests each of our products before we give it to the clients. So, and I know they're pretty good at their jobs. So
what's the success rate?
I can't say. I've never heard of an exploit on a Catalyst software. So
yeah. Is your company like Radar Services? Are you ready for that, or is it a constant change that you're facing actually in the way that you set up the approach that you have for the IT security system of your clients? Is it a constant change? Are you ready for it? Are you ready for future attacks?
Well, we hope so. I mean, you have to have researchers on your side also. That's why we have a pen testing team, or basically a red team that does penetration testings with clients and auditing our internal services. Tech-wise, if you run cybersecurity monitoring, cyber defense center services for clients and bring the technology with you, you have to continuously adopt. So the easiest thing is all the threat intel that is out there that you have to consider, wrap, deduplicate, and use. The other thing is how attacks are going on. So you have to continuously update your use cases, the machine learning components, the technology underneath, and of course the training of the analysts, because sometimes it's just important to look for specific variations of things that could trigger something, and you have to draw the right conclusions as a person there when you sit in front of the data. So it's a continuous battle, to be honest. Of course, always defenders and attackers. It's a continuous battle. The typical problem out there is that the attack side has more time, infinite time typically. It doesn't matter. Most of the cases, they don't have to attack now or tomorrow. They can just take the time until they figure out where there is an attack vector they could utilize. And the defenders, the attacked organizations, they don't have the time because they have to do everything else to run the stuff. And so they typically cannot focus on the defense side. And I think that's the advantage of somebody like Radar, who really can focus on the defensive side, consider all the technology that is required, and has a large base of installations where you can see things on one place and immediately can consider what does that mean for everybody else. So you can continuously update the systems to keep everybody as safe as possible.
Is the detection system getting better? If you look at like the time it takes to detect an attack, last year it was about 180 days. Is that getting better, detection?
Yes, it's getting better, yeah. It reduces approximately by 50 days per year now. But that will slow down, so it will not be minus 30 days next year. Yeah, so this will slow down. Why is that? Because there is more technology out there that is being utilized. There is more awareness out there of attacks that are going on. But there is a very wide span of organizations. So I think with some organizations, in some cases that you see out there, it's still 300 days or more until things are identified. And some are much better, just take probably a couple of hours or days. and every hour you don't get it is really an hour too long, actually, because really bad things can happen if you don't get it.
Are there any questions out there in the auditorium that we would like to ask right now? Otherwise, yes, please.
There is a microphone. Yeah. Thank you. So, in my mind, CPU manufacturers will always find it easier to sell faster CPUs than secure but less powerful CPUs. Are you aware of any CPU manufacturers working on any hardware design changes? And if so, maybe you can give us a high-level
Yes. Intel, the next Intel processors, they definitely considered Spectre in their design. There are white papers and publications about this. So I know it of Intel. I'm pretty sure that AMD, because of market pressure, also works on future mitigations. And a very interesting aspect there is open CPU architectures like RISC-V, because the whole design is publicly available, and because it's very popular in some branches, and it's even actively used by Western Digital in their hard disk controllers. So I suspect that open hardware designs are a very good approach to anticipate and to react towards these vulnerabilities, because many people and many eyes can look upon this and help to design resilient hardware designs.
I was trying to steer you more towards towards the hardware side, because the vulnerabilities you've mentioned are basically working with the hyper-threading methods and things like that. So other than removing them, how else can they change the hardware to protect against these attacks?
For example, they could do proper permission checks in speculatively executed code. And of course, this means a large slowdown in execution speed. But if you adapt the design in a way that these checks can be done in speculatively executed code in a fast way, then this would be a proper defense. And I think this is definitely an approach that the engineers there will do consider.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Or can you just pass on the microphone, maybe? Thank you.
There was, at the beginning of October, one article at the Bloomberg about China putting small chips on those server main boards. So what is your opinion about it?
I've heard different things, from it's a hoax to it's not a hoax to it's just done in a very special and very small number. So it's hard to tell. What I really can tell is that when you do such exploitations at a very large scale, there is probably really somewhere out there who will detect it. Because getting the data is, when you have access to the hardware design, that's pretty easy. But getting the data out there from the system is hard, because professional companies and agencies who use that hardware, they monitor their traffic. Of course, you can then craft some ways to hide that data by, let's say, when you have a long time, you access a YouTube video and say that's 1 bit, and a day later you access another YouTube video and this would also be a way for a covered channel. So there is, just as example, there is always a way to get the data out, but it's really hard to say. Does it answer your question? Because I was not there. I have not had access or did not analyze the hardware design. So it's really hard to give a real serious expertise on that.
something deeper in
Yes.
knowledge about it. So
Nobody
it's just
published
like
something deeper, so it's,
pointing the finger and saying this is.
yeah, it could be a political attempt as well. I don't know.
Yeah, before the midterm elections. I don't know.
Yeah, that's possible. But on the other hand, it's technically possible to encode data like in hiding it in it calls to YouTube videos as well. But on the other hand, when you do it on a large scale, somebody will notice it due to traffic monitoring. So it's really hard, and you can't really say, because there is just this one Bloomberg article and a lot of speculation and rumors out there.
Thank you.
But since we know that the Chinese are really big on surveillance, because as you might know, they are working on implementing a social score, and they will give everyone like ratings, and people with good ratings will have access to better services, and people with less good ratings will be kicked out of society. So, yeah.
Social credit is already in place.
Yes, in some
if
cities.
you're too low in social credits in China, you're not allowed to board a plane anymore.
Yes.
We do have another question.
Can this be a marketing strategy? You know, the adoption of Windows 10 was very hard. And we are using old hardware. Can be this marketing strategy from companies? You said about escalation of number of attacks, number of vulnerabilities from 2016. And this can be, I think, a way to buy new hardware, new software, to adopt new technologies, software technologies, to invest more money. Can be?
Right, yeah, of course. I mean, there have always been rumors that the antivirus companies were the first guys to write viruses. So it can drive the market in some respect, I think. I think it's a balance. The criminal motivation behind attacks, typically it's money, of course, nowadays, or nation states. Nation states or money, both, basically. And it's a big market, as you know, and it's going to get even bigger out there. So that drives, I think, some motivations for investments out there. But at the end of the day, you never can say that I don't know, a producer of a firewall or something is not the other guy who's doing the attacks at the same time. It could be, always.
If I remember well, Heartbleed was known by NSA 2 years in advance, no? And
I would say
I was
at
thinking,
least.
Spectre, how long did they know about this vulnerability?
That's what I tried to say before on a very, careful way. That there is always, some parties out there might have a very, very long-term strategy to achieve things. They have the time, they have the money, they have the companies there on site. So this is kind of strange, to be honest, the things that are going on here. And unfortunately, we Europeans, we have given up everything, or the core technology we had here, the knowledge and everything regarding IT, we've just given away over the last 30 years. And when you take a closer look at the cybersecurity industry, it's pretty much the same, because we have, 10, 15 solid cybersecurity companies in Europe anymore. And the rest is America, or it's Israel, or it's China nowadays. This is frightening. This is really frightening, because everything is IT, and everything will be IT in future. So, and if we don't have the technology to keep that under control, or to monitor it, or to detect things, then it's going to be a dark, dark times in future if we don't take care here. Regarding the attacks, things in service, there is a documented case of the NSA, optimizing Cisco routers before going out to clients. So that was done in the past, and I'm sure that's given business nowadays for some agencies doing this on a larger scale.
This was actually, thanks very much for the question, because it was where I wanted to get for the last round that we're discussing right now. Is it a business model, what we're doing here? And you said something before in your presentation, actually in cloud computing, those attacks are not as present as they are on local systems. Could it be the providers of cloud computing services, could it be them trying to show that cloud computing is safer, something you should change to?
No. Definitely not. I mean, you can also access attack cloud computing infrastructure. And I mean, the trivial case is that you just rent a virtual server on some cloud, and then many other virtual machines run on the same physical host. So there is definitely an attack vector. I just said or meant that it's typically more challenging to attack there, because the timing behavior or the timing factor is which all these side channels build upon is very hard to predict, because you can't really know what the other systems are doing. But I think it's definitely necessary that cloud computing providers must take these challenges very seriously and this threat very seriously.
All right, thank you. Last round of questions, if anyone has a question.
So about isolated platforms, like whatever, doesn't mind. Like you said, it's very easy to make a malware that escapes the virtual machine and attacks the physical machine.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, even if the physical platform is offline, isolated from the internet, the fact that the virtual machines can be attacked, it's not safe either way, right?
Yes, I agree. But I don't really understand how a cloud infrastructure can be offline. You need to, customers or attackers must install their software somehow. And of course, it can be malicious then as well. And when you install the software, or even if you ship CDs or DVDs to them, it could be, there can be some software exploiting these. But then there is no vector to get the data out when they are not online.
Yeah, but the physical part is online. Just the
okay.
The virtual part is online. The physical part is offline. The physical servers.
You cannot really separate the both that much. I mean, the physical part has to be online for the virtual part to be online.
All right.
Yeah, at the technical level, yes.
Wonderful. Any other question that we have?
Okay, so the gentleman there stole, read my mind, they stole the question about the Supermicro mainboards. Somehow related to this, given that we rely on external or foreign hardware and the current trends like governments asking for cryptographic experts to break encryption, just so they will have a backdoor. How much should be concerned about intentionally introduced vulnerabilities? Because any backdoor with a vulnerability will be discovered by third parties eventually.
Well, I would say you should always be concerned about the hardware you are using. As I said in my presentation, we cannot even trust the memory, and even though I personally wouldn't distinguish between vulnerabilities that were placed there on purpose, with a real malicious purpose, or by vulnerabilities that are there mistakenly, or because any vulnerability is a potential attack vector. So I would definitely be aware of both.
Yeah, but do you think this could make things much worse?
I would be very
they
worried.
Know from the start.
Yes, I would be very worried as well, because the number of vulnerabilities that are disclosed is increasing. So this just speaks for itself. We need to be more aware, definitely, and things will get worse.
All right, thank you very much for the question. Thanks very much for the answer. If we go into a last statement from everybody, I just might pick up a presentation of yours, Harald, where you said on the first page, "Don't panic, plan." So what's the future? What's the future ahead of us in terms of IT security?
Yeah, don't panic. I think it's doable. I think the key word is resilience. Really thinking about what can we do in a wider portfolio, to prepare ourselves for these darker times I was mentioning before. And it's not getting better, full stop. It's not getting better. So we have to prepare ourselves and do everything we can regarding design, people, training, education, monitoring,
Awareness.
yeah, really taking care of everything. So don't trust technology. Again, full stop. Technology will not solve your problem here.
And don't trust the memory.
So basically, it's resilience means be prepared for things that are here and be open-eyed, go around and not try to blind out things. Yeah.
Thank you, Harald. Tamas?
And be open-minded about future things future discoveries and scenarios that you didn't anticipate, because you never know. Like these Project Zero guys, they just had this crazy idea and, well, nobody anticipated it.
Manuel?
I just continue what Thomas said. Nobody anticipated these exploits, and I think this is because of the very nature, because attacks by now have become that complex that they really exploit the designs that were made, and the attack vectors are so complex and so incredible complex that an engineer who is just designing it with the mind to get it working, even though with security in mind, cannot, even if it's a team, they cannot face any challenge, any security challenge they have if it's at that complex level.
All right, thank you very much.
Creative.
So, don't panic.
And that's creative, because it requires a certain amount of artistry to be able to come up with these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you need many teams, and one single team cannot see everything because everybody is different. Huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I guess we're closing it off like this. Thanks very much to Harald Reisinger from Radar Services. Thanks very much to Tamas Bakas from Catalysts and Manuel Wiesinger from SBA Research. Thank you very much. I guess don't panic, but don't trust your memory.
Yeah, that's the spirit.
Thank you.
Thank you.